Welcome everyone to today's webcast focusing on the KTER Center's recent scoping review, Job-Related Social Communication Skills of Adults with Autism Spectrum Disorder. I'm very pleased you joined us for this on-demand webcast. I'm your host, Ann Outlaw, and today I'm joined by an author of this scoping review, Jeremy Rasmussen. We're staff on the Knowledge Translation for Employment Research Center, or the KTER Center, which is housed at American Institutes for Research. The KTER Center is funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, or NIDLR. This webcast is part of a series, and if you're interested in hearing about pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities, please tune in to the second webcast in this series. Check out our website for the link to that webcast, accessible presentation materials of both webcasts, and more information about these scoping reviews. So first, some background. The KTER Center is here to test knowledge translation strategies to help stakeholders use and understand research to ultimately help people with disabilities find and keep their jobs. We do this by doing research and other activities related to improving employment outcomes among individuals with disabilities. We start this work by talking to stakeholders. Our technical working group, or TWIG, on autism is comprised of a mix of disability-oriented leaders like NIDLR grantees, people with autism, individuals from the vocational rehabilitation, policy, and employment communities. And these professionals really help us to identify the most pressing needs of people with autism when they're looking and keeping their jobs. The TWIG also helps us to develop protocols and instruments for the focus groups that we conducted. So based on the TWIG feedback, we conducted 2 sets of focus groups, one with counselors and one with people, VR counselors specifically, and one with people with autism. We discussed some of the challenges people with autism face when in the workforce and some of the ways they tackle these issues with the support of their VR counselors. So back in June 2018, we published a short webisode that discussed these findings and that's on a webcast that's located on our website. And I've added a link to that webisode on this presentation at the end of the PowerPoint slides. So today we're here to talk about the scoping review on job-related social communication skills of adults with autism spectrum disorder, and that were based on the themes that were identified by those stakeholders, so by the TWIGs and the focus groups. And joining us today about this scoping review is Jeremy Rasmussen. Jeremy is my colleague here at American Institutes for Research, or AIR, and he is a project associate working on the KTER Center and has been very busy this winter leading the development of 2 scoping reviews. Hey, Jeremy, thanks so much for taking time out to talk to us today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get started. What were some of the key findings of this review?
Well, the objective of the scoping review was to identify interventions that had been successful in helping people with ASD achieve employment outcomes through developing and applying evidence-based strategies to improve social and communication skills. We focused especially on strategies that can be applied by VR counselors and employment specialists who work with people with autism. The scoping review identified 4 kinds of promising strategies to help adults with ASD, including interviewing skills, on-the-job social skills training, self-advocacy, and compensatory strategies to aid learning on the job.
Ooh, so can you provide some specific examples of strategies in relation to these themes?
Of course. For interview skills, viewing modeled or simulated interviews and practicing or conducting mock interviews support the development of interviewing skills. For on-the-job social skills training, facilitated group activities and training support the development of social skills and problem-solving skills. These groups include between 4 and 14 individuals with ASD and that met at least weekly for 8 to 12 weeks. Each meeting included a focus, such as conversational skills, evaluating actions and facing failures, and working with difficult people. Uh, for self-advocacy, facilitated group skills training can improve participants' abilities to advocate for themselves. In the research, group skills training included groups of adults with ASD who participated in 8 to 12 discussions, lectures, and formal and informal communication practice activities on such topics as how to request time off and extra support. And for compensatory strategies, things like memory aids or instructional strategies help to facilitate learning or completion of a task without prompting or assistance by others.
Very interesting. What type of studies were included in these reviews?
Well, this scoping review included a scan of the literature that included research articles and research-based products such as toolkits and training materials that were published between 1998 and 2017. This date range was selected because the Workforce Investment Act was introduced in 1998. It provided for state and local workforce investment activities to increase employment, including for people with disabilities. Thus, to filter out less relevant research, the search strategy included published and non-published research from that time frame.
And how do you know if those interventions work?
Well, when reviewing the literature, we really focused on how often we found that a particular strategy, such as job interviewing skills, popped up across the literature. Though there is no guarantee that these interventions will work for everyone in every situation, it is promising that multiple studies using different methodologies came to relatively similar conclusions on their effectiveness.
Oh, okay, I see. Um, so what were the limitations for the scoping review?
Well, we did not assess the quality of each study included in this review. We instead assessed each study's conclusions, implications, and recommendations as they related to individuals with ASD and employment. Also, only studies in English were used. There may have been appropriate articles written in other languages, but they were not considered for this review.
I see. Moving on, what are some of the implications for policy and practice?
Well, the scoping review resulted in 4 specific recommendations for VR counselors and employment specialists. Number 1, practice interviews with clients, facilitate practice interviews with family or friends and VR staff, and ask for feedback. As part of this practice, examine the related resources for potential options. Number 2, provide access to job coaches and supportive employment strategies to individuals with ASD. Number 3, facilitate or refer individuals to group activities or trainings with individuals with ASD. And number 4, support individuals with ASD to use reminders, checklists, and technological assistance on the job.
Those are very specific. Uh, Thank you so much, Jeremy. And I'd like to tell our listeners that the implications for practice at the KTER Center is that this scoping review was used to provide content for a training, an online hour-long module that the KTER Center provided to VR staff of state agencies that supervise more than 4 people. The idea behind this training was to position the participating supervisors as, quote, knowledge brokers, which we know is a KT strategy. In addition to learning about interventions to support adults with autism in their efforts to improve employment outcomes, as you would suspect, the participating supervisors were also given access to an additional module on adult learning principles. So to help them think through how best to convey to their staff what they had learned in this module. So participating supervisors were then contacted once a month for 6 months by KTER Center staff to find out more about how KTER could continue to support them to apply these findings. The KTER Center will summarize these findings for this knowledge broker study in a separate webcast. So a little teaser there. Let's go on. So some resources. Earlier today, I spoke about the Autism Focus Group's tech brief and webisode on the focus groups. So those are available on our website at kter.org. You can also see who's involved in our technical working group who really helped focus the research questions of the scoping review, and that's on our website. As the scoping review is published, we will send registrants to this webcast, all linked to the study for your review. And thank you. This was a brief webcast about the KTER Center's recent scoping review on autism. And Jeremy, thank you so much for taking time out for discussing this with us today.
You are very welcome. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I also wanted to thank our listeners as well for their time to hear about this review. Let us know what you thought about today's webcast by completing a brief evaluation. It should take just about 3 or 4 minutes, and you'll receive a link to the evaluation if you registered for today's webcast. You can also find it on our website at kter.org. Also, as I mentioned, this is part of a series on recent scoping review findings. If you're interested in hearing more about pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities, tune into the next webcast in the series, and you can find the link to that on our website. And finally, here's our contact information. If you have any questions, you could, of course, complete those in the evaluation, ask those in the evaluation, or feel free to contact us directly at the information above. We appreciate the support of NIDLR to work on these scoping reviews and, of course, to produce this webcast and other activities to share our findings. So thanks again, everyone, and have a good day.